The Royal Rumble is in St. Louis, and you have a great history, Rick, wrestling in St. Louis. It was a unique territory because, if memory serves, it was only one city, correct? Just St. Louis, just one city. That was the whole territory.
Yes.
And how often did they have shows?
Well, it actually was attached to the Kansas City territory, but St. Louis was its own entity. Does that make sense?
It was booked on its own. It was a standalone.
Yeah, but there were always several guys from the KC territory allowed to come to St. Louis. The rest of it, the guys could come from. It was a huge honor to be invited to wrestle in St. Louis. That's just the way it was. You come to St. Louis and you're in the big time, in the NWA.
And again, Rick, how often did they have shows? I mean, how many arena shows? How many TV?
They ran all once a month, and then they took the summer off.
They ran once a month and took the summer off.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, because and the thought was back then, Mark, Gagne didn't run in the summer either, because in the summer, the Midwest people are outside. They're not farming. I mean, there's still a lot of rural area in Kansas and Missouri and like Minnesota, Wisconsin. Yeah, Vern ran very seldomly too. So I can't say they didn't run. I can't remember if it ran maybe it ran every 3 weeks.
So, but did they do house shows that they put on TV, or did they do a separate TV taping? Because Wrestling at the Chase was a separate TV taping. Okay.
Totally separate.
So basically 2 shows.
2 shows.
In every cycle.
Yep.
Now, oh, by the way, our crack producer, Steve Kaufman, who is the greatest, who knows far more about wrestling than either of us, maybe because he's younger and hasn't forgotten, but he does a great job. And he said that at Tuesday in Texas, you got involved with a chair at ringside. So there you go.
Yep, there you go.
You helped Taker win the title. Steve is the brains of this operation. Our brains have been beat to mush by, I don't know, bumps, alcohol, you name it. It's happened. But Sam Muchnick was the promoter.
Near death-defying experiences.
and more on the way. Sam Muchnick was the promoter in St. Louis, and the style was very serious, almost like real sport. What was expected when you wrestled in St. Louis? What did Mr. Muchnick want you to do?
Well, if you wrestled in St. Louis, the sleeper was a finish. The abdominal stretch was a finish. The figure 4 was a finish. There was no turning it over. You do not touch the ropes. And I went to him one night and I said, I was wrestling Dick the Bruiser. And I said, with the figure 4, I said, and he was right. He said, we'll have a ride if you do it. So, but I got his permission. I held the rope. So Dick's shoulder, it put him in so much pain that he laid back flat. And the referee, rather than giving up, because, babyface can't give up. That was the word. That was the way it was back then. And then instead of tapping out, the guy counted his shoulders down.
But that was a rarity for you to use the ropes, correct?
Oh, very rare. God.
What was the crowd reaction when you did that?
Insane.
In a good way or a bad way?
No, they wanted to come in the ring and kill me. Walking out that aisle in St. Louis was a rough night, boy. They didn't like the finish.
Who were the big stars in St. Louis back when you wrestled there? I know it's a lot of familiar names, but who got over there more than most?
Okay, big star Dick Murdoch, big star Ted DiBiase, big star Kerry Von Erich, Gene Kiniski, Jack Briscoe, Terry Dory, Jack Mulligan, Jack Lanza, Pat O'Connor. I'm trying to think.
My God, Rick, that's a who's who of wrestling from that era. Harley Race, obviously.
I said Harley, yeah. I'm trying to think. I wrestled Gene Kiniski there for an hour. Isn't that crazy? Terry, Dory, the Von Erichs were so hot off their TV. They came in there. Obviously, David was getting ready to win. David would have been NWA champion,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
What about Bruiser Brody? He worked there as well.
Oh, Bruiser Brody guy. I'm sorry, Bruiser Brody, but I wrestled him there a lot.
You mentioned Dick the Bruiser.
Dick the Bruiser, yep.
Now, Dick the Bruiser and Bruiser Brody were a little out of character for what Muchnick usually booked, weren't they?
Yeah, but remember, I mean, so was Dick Murdoch. Dick Murdoch is going to be remembered. I know his name doesn't come up enough. Dick Murdoch, maybe one of the 10 greatest workers of all time. But Murdoch would do stuff where he would take a bump over the top rope and like he'd make people think that he was dizzy, and he'd walk into the ring post and take a bump. I mean, there were so many styles there. Von Raschke, the Baron with the claw. I mean, there was no getting out of the claw. Does that make sense? I mean, everything was a finish. I mean, a roll-up was a finish. There was already, when Wilbur Snyder came in, he put the abdominal stretch on somebody. When was the last time you saw somebody give up with the abdominal stretch?
Now, a couple things, because I was a tape trader back then, but I didn't see a lot of St. Louis wrestling. Mm-hmm. It's a lot's on YouTube now, so check it out. You'll see what we're talking about. But correct me if I'm wrong. There were no managers, right? Or very rarely.
Very rarely.
Like, wasn't Bobby one of the exceptions? I think he let Bobby come in with somebody at one point.
Well, the Blackjacks came in without Bobby. No, they didn't have managers there a lot.
Now, you mentioned the Blackjacks. I was told they didn't have a tag team championship and that they very rarely had tag team matches. Is that right?
They just had one other title, a Missouri State title.
So no tag team title?
No.
Now, the Missouri State title was very prestigious, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Now, you held it briefly, but that was looked at kind of a stepping stone to bigger and better.
Yeah, it's huge. That was the second highest paying position on the card.
Missouri title.
Yes.
Did they have a world title match on pretty much every show?
I would say 90% of them were, yeah.
Now, every promotion, every territory back then had its secondary title. Was the Missouri title the most prestigious of those titles that were secondary to the world belt? And what other promotions had titles that really meant a lot back in that day?
Well, I think I'm trying to figure out what day and time the Intercontinental Championship became the one that Vince has now.
Right. Well, it was the North American title with Pat Patterson, and then they rebranded it.
What year did Pat start that?
I want to say that was in the late 70s or early 80s.
So Pat was the first, right?
Pat was the first, but then they rebranded it with Ted. I don't think that Pat ever lost it to Ted. I think Ted just came in with it. Or maybe Ted came in with the North American and they made it the Intercontinental.
Whatever, those were the two most prestigious second-ranked belts.
Missouri and Intercontinental.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, did they ever get blood in St. Louis, Rick?
Yeah.
Really? But not much, right?
They didn't care. If you were willing to do it. I don't think Sam was over the top about it, but he let it happen.
Now, what about crazy angles? What about, stuff that is over the top by today's standards?
No, none.
What angle can you recall?
I can't remember shooting an angle in St. Louis in the old days.
Never.
You shot the angle on TV and brought it to the house show.
But even those were relatively conservative angles, right?
Oh, very conservative.
Like, give me an example of a St. Louis angle, one that you might have been involved in.
Actually, I can't remember ever shooting an angle. I just remember, I mean, when Dick the Bruiser came out and made some promo about me being a little sissy or whatever, I should be wearing a dress, and then, I mean, it was that hot. Wrestling was that hot. It was that simple. And yet, that's why when I watch the shows now, I think, God, how has it changed so much? Because it was so simple. They just loved wrestling. To me, it's a travesty that the Rams are away from St. Louis. It's a great sports town. And wrestling, the Royal Rumble will be in this week. Those fans to this day are avid. And I cannot wait to watch the Rumble this year.
I want to jump back to the Intercontinental title. I just got this up here on Wikipedia, which obviously is always 100% accurate. WWF North American Heavyweight Champion Pat Patterson became the inaugural champion on September 1st, 1979. It was said he had unified his title with the South American Heavyweight Championship in a tournament in Rio de Janeiro, although both the tournament and South Africa Championship were entirely fictional. So there you go. That's the branding and the development of the Intercontinental title. We're talking about St. Louis wrestling with Sam Muchnick. Could that kind of promotion work today? A serious, kayfabe style? We know too much, don't we?
Yeah.
Is that good or bad?
Bad.
Can it ever get back?
No.
Yeah, there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, is there? See, that's the one thing about wrestling that makes me sad, Nate, because nobody wants to admit it now, but less people watch wrestling than ever before. And I think that's because we no longer can suspend disbelief. Like, I knew it was, what it is since I was a little kid, but the way it's presented made me forget that. And now we can never forget that. Do you find that to be sad?
Well, first of all, the universe is bigger and everybody's making money. But I think the problem with both companies now is that they're in the process of trying to get, it's like once every 5 years. I'll give you an example again. Sasha, Ashley, or Charlotte, Becky, Bailey, right? All at the same time. So, 4 of them coming up and all of them making it big. Huge, right? It's like when the guys came up with Roman, Ambrose, and Seth Rollins, the Shield, right? That does not happen every day. Look at the number of guys that have been there. And they're there for a month or 2 months or 3 months and they're gone. And then they're, trying to find somebody else. And I hope that it makes the American people understand that you just don't walk in there and win over Vince McMahon. You got to get in that ring and you've got to give them something that they haven't seen or something that's better than what they've seen. Or you're not going to make it.
I agree 100%. I think the larger-than-life component's been lost, too.